Hey, you're listening to Horror Drift Stories. Before we begin, tell me where you're listening from. If you enjoy slow, atmospheric horror, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Quick heads up, there may be a few ads early on. But after that, nothing but the story. Now, get comfortable. Let the quiet take over. And listen closely. Story 1. I don't know if I'm losing my mind, or if something is actually wrong. I keep going back and forth between those two thoughts so much that it's starting to feel like my head is stuck in a loop. My girlfriend, C, has been telling me she loves me a lot lately. That sounds like a good thing, and I know most people would read that and think I'm being ungrateful. If you've ever been in a relationship where you felt unwanted, you probably know how badly you can crave affection. I get it. I'm not trying to complain about being loved. I'm trying to explain why it suddenly feels off. C and I have been together for 7 months. For most of that time, she was the shy one. I'm not saying she was cold or distant. She wasn't. She just had a hard time saying I love you out loud. It became this small, awkward issue around month 3, and it lasted for about 4 months after that. Not because she didn't care, but because the words seemed to get stuck in her throat. We talked about it more than once. The first time, I tried to keep it light. I asked her if she just wasn't the type to say it, if it made her uncomfortable, if she needed more time. She got quiet, then admitted that past boyfriends had messed with her head. She said they were insecure and controlling, and they would love bomb her all the time. Constant I love you, constant need for reassurance, constant pressure to respond the exact way they wanted. She said it made her feel like love was a test she could fail. So, when she didn't say it much, it wasn't because she didn't feel it. It was because she didn't want to say it in a way that felt forced, or performative, or like she was paying a toll. She asked me to be patient. She told me she was trying, that she really did love me, but saying it often made her feel trapped. She called what we had the first healthy relationship she's ever had, and she said she didn't want to ruin it by pretending to be someone she wasn't. I tried to be understanding. I really did. If I'm being honest, I'm needy. That's not something I'm proud of, but it's true. I like reassurance. I like hearing that I matter. I like being told I'm loved, not just shown. The words hit me in a way that actions don't always hit. I can recognize that's partly my own insecurity, and I've been working on it, but I won't pretend it isn't part of my personality. Still, once she told me her reasons, I respected her boundaries. I stopped pushing. I stopped fishing for the words. I told myself that if she expressed love in other ways, that was still love. And she did express it in other ways. She was affectionate. She loved cuddling, loved kissing, loved sitting close enough that our knees touched even if we weren't talking. She made time for me. She remembered little things I said in passing and brought them up later. She would watch a show I liked, even if it wasn't her thing. She'd rub my back when she could tell I was stressed. She'd send me small photos during the day, like a picture of a coffee she was drinking or a sunset, just to say she was thinking of me without saying it directly. So the lack of I love you stopped bothering me as much. I adjusted. I learned the language she was comfortable speaking. That's why the shift 3 weeks ago hit me so hard. It started on a normal day. She came over to my apartment and immediately hugged me like she hadn't seen me in months. Not just a quick hello hug. A full, tight hug where she pressed her face into my shoulder and didn't let go for a while. Then she pulled back, looked at me with watery eyes, and said she appreciated me so much. And then she said it, clear as day. I love you. For a second, it felt like everything I'd been quietly wanting finally happened. I felt warm, almost dizzy with happiness. I hugged her back, and we had this sweet moment where I told her I loved her too, and that I was proud of her for saying it when she felt ready. I thought maybe she finally felt safe enough with me. I thought maybe we were moving forward. But she kept saying it that day, not just once, not even 3 times. It was like a faucet turned on. She said she loved me when I made coffee. She said she loved me when we sat on the couch. She said she loved me when I got up to use the bathroom. She texted it even when she was sitting 10 feet away from me. She'd look at me and say, I love you, like she was checking something off in her mind. At first, it felt like a good change. It was unexpected, sure, but I told myself she was just catching up. Maybe she was making up for the months she held it back. Maybe she had been wanting to say it more and finally got past the mental block. Then it continued. The next day, and the next, and the next. Every day after that, she said it constantly. In texts, on calls, when we were together, even in moments where it didn't fit naturally. If I took too long to answer, she'd repeat it. If I responded with, I love you too, she'd ask, how much? If I said, a lot, she'd ask again, like she wanted a bigger number, a better answer, the right combination of words. I didn't clock it as a problem right away because, again, it sounds ridiculous to complain about. I even wondered if I was the one being weird, like maybe I couldn't handle good things. I tried to relax into it. The first time I really felt uneasy was about a week after it started. I was on a voice call with my main friend group while playing a shooter game. We're one of those groups that formed online and somehow stayed close. A mix of guys and girls, all socially awkward in our own ways, all better at being friends through headsets than at making friends in real life. We live in different states, but most of us are close enough that we've met up for conventions before. It's the kind of friendship where you know someone's laugh, their habits, their moods, even if you don't see their face every day. At that point, I was home alone. C wasn't with me. The call was going well, lots of joking, the kind of night where you can actually forget the world. For a couple hours. In the middle of a match, I got a message from C. I didn't check it right away because I was focused on the game, and I didn't want to be rude to my friends. A few minutes later, after the match ended, I opened my phone. Her message said, "Hey, what are you up to?" Normal enough. Then 2 minutes later, she sent another one. I love you so much. You know I love you, right? Do you love me? It wasn't the words that bothered me by themselves. It was the timing and the sudden need for a reply. I had been on calls with my friends plenty of times before. She knew that. She had never acted like she needed to interrupt it. Still, I didn't want to turn it into a problem. I texted her back something reassuring. I told her I loved her. I was happy she was in my life, and that I was just gaming with friends. She responded with hearts and more "I love you" messages, and I let it go. Then a few days later, it happened again. Another call. Another good night. We were laughing hard enough that my face hurt. Someone had told a story about a convention meetup that went wrong, and we were all piling on with jokes. I checked my phone and saw another message from C, sent while I was distracted. This one said, "Hey, I hope you don't mind, but I'm coming over in 20. I love you so much. Do you love me? DDD." By the time I read it, she was supposedly 5 minutes away. I stared at my phone like it was playing a joke on me. She hadn't mentioned it. It was just suddenly decided. And it was decided right when I was busy with my friends again. I told the group I had to go because C was coming over. They were understanding, but I felt that little sting of frustration. Not at her exactly, more at the pattern I was starting to sense, but didn't want to admit. When she arrived, she looked upset. I asked her what was going on, and she said she'd been feeling lonely and sad, and she just needed to be with me. She said she didn't want to be alone tonight. She clung to me like she was afraid I'd disappear if she let go. I didn't push. I didn't accuse. I told myself she was having a rough day. We had a decent night. We ate dinner, watched something on TV, and she kept repeating how much she loved me like it was a comfort object. But after she fell asleep, I lay there staring at the ceiling and thinking about those messages, about how both of the weirder ones happened while I was on calls with my friends, about how she suddenly needed reassurance right in the middle of moments where I was happy and distracted. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself it was coincidence. Last week, my friend group started planning a trip to a new art exhibition. It was Elle's idea, because Elle is the biggest art person in our group. She's the kind of person who will send you photos of paintings and talk about lighting and brush strokes and how a piece feels emotionally. It's not really my world, but I like being around people who care about things, and the idea of seeing something new sounded fun. I wanted to invite C. I really did. I just hadn't gotten around to it yet. Work has been brutal lately. This season always is. Long days, constant pressure, the kind of exhaustion that makes you feel like you're operating on fumes. When I do see C, a lot of the time it's just us lying in bed or on the couch, cuddling while I try not to fall asleep mid-sentence. Then I wake up, rush to work, and the cycle repeats. Last night, Elle messaged me sounding shaken. She said a fake account had followed her on Instagram and started sending her nasty messages. Not vague insults, specific ones. The account called her a whore, called her a homewrecker, told her to stop flirting with men who were already in relationships with much better women than her. It was cruel in that personal way, like someone wanted to hurt her, not just troll her. She sent me screenshots. The moment I read them, my stomach sank. Not because I knew it was C, but because I could see why Elle thought it might be. Elle doesn't talk to many people besides us and her family. She doesn't post much. She doesn't have random drama. So when a fake account shows up accusing her of being a homewrecker, her mind goes to the only girlfriend in the group. And there was another detail that made my skin go cold. The writing style. The little emojis. The way the sentences were phrased. It reminded me of C's texting style, just enough that I didn't like it. La asked me directly if I thought it could have been C. I told her I didn't know. I told her I wanted to believe it wasn't, and that was true. I wanted it to be some random troll or a misunderstanding. I wanted to defend C because the alternative meant something ugly. While I was still talking to Elle, my girlfriend texted me again. Same type of message as before, sudden and cheerful and urgent. She said she was coming over, out of nowhere, with the same reasoning. She felt overwhelmed and needed me. That timing made my chest feel tight. It was like every time I was having a conversation that didn't include her, she somehow appeared in the middle of it. I told Elle I'd ask C later, when things were calm. I didn't want to confront her while I was already stressed. I didn't want to blow up a relationship based on a suspicion. Then C arrived, and she arrived crying. Real crying, not fake tears. She looked like she'd been holding it in for hours. Her cheeks were blotchy. Her eyes were puffy. She threw herself into my arms and started apologizing for being too much. She said she'd been feeling overwhelmed because I've been busy. She said she missed me all the time. She said she loved me so much it hurt. What do you do with that? How do you look at someone crying in your arms and say, "By the way, did you make a fake Instagram account to harass my friend?" So I didn't ask. I comforted her. I made her tea. I sat with her. We watched something mindless. She calmed down, and by the end of the night, we were asleep. Today, I had a rare, free day. I decided I'd spend it with her and bring up the fake account later, gently, when I could frame it as a question rather than an accusation. We were cuddling in bed mid-morning. She was playing with my fingers like she always does when she's relaxed. She started talking about vacation spots she'd like to visit with me. Beaches, cabins, little cute towns, normal couple talk. Then out of nowhere she asked, in this casual tone like it was nothing, when my trip with my friends would be. It hit me like a slap. I froze, just for a second, but enough that she noticed. "What?" I said. "What trip?" She laughed lightly, like I was teasing. "The art thing. When is it?" I forced myself to act normal. "How do you know about that?" She didn't hesitate. "You told me yesterday," she said, still smiling. "You were half asleep, but you told me. You don't remember?" That explanation should have calmed me down, but it didn't. It made me more uneasy, because I was almost certain I hadn't told her. I replayed last night in my head, her crying, me trying to comfort her, us falling asleep. I didn't remember mentioning anything about my friend group planning a trip. Maybe I did, maybe I was exhausted, and I said it without thinking. That's possible, but it didn't feel possible. It felt like she already knew, and she was testing whether I'd admit it. Or worse, like she didn't need me to tell her, because she had another way of finding out. That's when all the dots started lining up in my head in a way I couldn't ignore anymore. The sudden shift in how often she said she loved me, like she'd flipped from shy to obsessive overnight. The way she interrupted my calls with my friends. The way she showed up at my apartment, right when I was laughing and distracted. The way Elle got those messages. The way C asked about the trip without me telling her. And then the thought I didn't want to think. What if she's watching me? Not in the romantic way people say it. Not, "I can't stop thinking about you." I mean literally watching, tracking, reading, listening. I started wondering if my phone was bugged, or my laptop, or if she had access to my accounts somehow. Maybe she knew my password. Maybe I logged in at her place once. Maybe she installed something when I was in the shower. I know that sounds paranoid, but I couldn't get it out of my mind. I needed to test it. I'm an avid reader, and she isn't. So I told her I wanted to go buy a new book, and that I might swing by the library. I asked if she wanted to come. She declined, which wasn't suspicious by itself. She doesn't like libraries. She gets bored. She says they smell weird. I promised I'd bring her food from her favorite restaurant while I was out. That got a smile out of her, a quick, bright one, and she told me she loved me again, like she couldn't help it. Then I left. Instead of using my phone, I went to the public computers. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I told myself I'd sit down, type this out, and once I saw the words on a screen, I'd laugh and feel embarrassed. But even walking into the library, I felt like my body was too alert. Like I kept expecting to see her in the parking lot. Like I kept expecting my phone to buzz with another message, asking where I was and who I was with. I sat at one of the public computers and made a new account, because if I'm right about anything, if she really does have access to my devices, then I don't want to post this from anything connected to me. And while I've been typing this, she's messaged me again. More I love you, more do you love me, more asking exactly how much. I don't know if I'm overreacting. I don't know if my brain is turning normal relationship issues into a scary story because I'm stressed and tired. I don't know if C is just anxious and clinging because I've been working too much. But something feels wrong in a way I can't shake. If she does know what I'm doing and what I'm saying to my friends, how does she know? Is it my phone? Is it my computer? Is it as simple as her guessing and me giving myself away without realizing it? Or is it something worse? I hate that I'm even asking these questions because writing them down makes me sound like I'm spiraling. But if I'm spiraling, then why does it feel like she's always one step ahead of me? Story 2. I drove up on Sunday through rain so loud it felt like the whole world was vibrating. Thunder kept rolling over the mountains in steady waves, and every time it hit, the sound pressed down on the cab of my truck like a hand. I kept both hands on the wheel and stared through the blur of water on the windshield, trying not to think too far ahead. For the last 60 years, my grandma had lived in the same mountain farmhouse my grandpa built with his own hands. It was the kind of place that's supposed to feel safe because it never changes. But on that drive, all I could think about was how unpredictable she'd become. I kept running through possible scenes in my head, like I was rehearsing for an emergency. What if she didn't recognize me? What if she thought I was an intruder? How was I supposed to calm her down when she got scared and confused? The last time I visited, she'd come at me with a knife. Grandma had Lewy body dementia, and I learned the hard way that it's not the gentle kind of forgetful people imagine. It wasn't just misplaced keys or repeated stories. It was like her brain was misfiring in ways that turned her into someone else. Over time, she'd become known in the family for episodes. But even that word felt too small. She didn't just drift. She spiraled. She bothered people, especially the kids. She'd stand half-hidden around a corner and stare, silent and still, like she was waiting for someone to walk past. Sometimes she'd crawl on all fours and hiss at the grandchildren like an angry animal. More than one kid had cried so hard they threw up. We tried to keep them away, but family gatherings don't always follow plans, and Graham didn't understand boundaries anymore. There was one morning that got repeated like a warning story in the family. My cousin Sam walked into the playroom and found Graham on the floor with baby Jane. Graham was rolling on her back, reaching up at Jane with her fingernails. Her nails were torn and peeling, and there was blood under them like she'd been scratching at something hard. She was making this high, thin mewing sound, like a sick kitten. Sam said Graham didn't even look like a person in that moment. She was also half-dressed, which made it worse, because it made it feel less like a medical problem and more like something shameful and wrong that shouldn't exist in daylight. Jane went quiet after that, not just scared quiet. She stopped talking. Sam stopped bringing her around. She said she didn't care who got offended. She wasn't risking her kid being anywhere near Graham again. Lately, Graham had started doing things at night. Uncle Bill said sometimes they'd hear her begging and pleading in a frantic whisper, like she was trying to pray but couldn't form the words. Other times, she'd chant, but it wasn't clear speech. It sounded like she was choking on her own mouth, like her tongue and throat didn't want to cooperate. Sometimes they'd find her out of bed with the security alarm blaring, wandering through the dark house like she was searching for a door that wasn't there. And more than once, they found her outside, heading to the barn, insisting she was having long talks with Grandpa. She'd stand in the barn after midnight, speaking nonsense in a voice that didn't sound like hers. The problem was, Grandpa had been dead for a long time. He died young, in the way some men of his generation did. Drunk in town, loud, running his mouth at the wrong person. People called it frontier justice, with a straight face. Like that made it clean. The story I grew up with was that Gram brought him home and buried him herself. Not in the cemetery, in the barn. Specifically, in the area where they used to keep the goats. Family legend says Gram started digging his grave inside that barn after the first night she found him, passed out drunk, in the hayloft. Nobody could ever prove what was true and what was exaggerated. But no one in my mom's family liked going into that barn after Grandpa died. The adults didn't talk about it much, and the kids learned quickly that the barn was a place you didn't play. Still, Gram didn't fall apart when Grandpa died. She didn't curl up and let the world swallow her. She held the homestead together and, in some ways, made it stronger. She started a roadside produce stand, the first one anyone in the county could remember. Goat cheese and pickled carrots in the winter, yellow peaches and jalapenos in the summer. People drove out of their way for her stuff. She ran it all herself. She never remarried, even though men tried. Gram thought men were foolish toys for young girls. She wasn't interested in being somebody's wife. She hunted, worked the land, made her own liquor, and sold enough to put my mom and my 2 uncles through state college. She was tough in a way that felt almost unreal now, considering how fragile and unpredictable she'd become. When the diagnosis came, Mom said Gram didn't even flinch. She didn't cry. She didn't ask why. She acted like a doctor had just told her the weather would be bad next week. She was proud, Mom told me once. She said that Lewy disease had never met a woman like her. If only that had been true, maybe it wouldn't have gotten so dark. Mom was the one who called me and asked me to go up to Gram's. "Margie, your Uncle Bill needs a break," she said. "Honestly, I do too," I said. "Work has been a nightmare. They're replacing my whole graphics department with AI. Mom made a little impressed noise. "Ooh, fancy." "It's a fancy kind of messed up," I said. Mom sighed, and her voice softened. "I'm sorry, honey. I know you work hard on your computer stuff." She always said it like that, like my job was a hobby I should grow out of. "Why can't Uncle Bill watch her?" I asked. "He's planning on taking Miss Jean down to Gatlinburg for a few days," Mom said. "Miss Jean is going to that open-eye Alzheimer's Institute Billy took your Gram to. Uncle Bill just needs a little break. Can you come up and sit with Gram while he's gone?" "I don't know," I said. "I've got a lot going on." "She'd love to see you," Mom continued. "Billy says she's doing really well lately. The new medication is working. She's been stable." "That's good news," I said, even though I didn't fully believe in miracles anymore. Mom sounded excited, like she was trying to sell me on hope. "The doctor put her on something new. She hasn't even been wearing diapers, Margie. And she's got this new iPad that goes straight to the doctor's phone. Can you believe that? It's a miracle." "Mom," I said, warning in my voice. "It's just a couple days," she said quickly. "Quick weekend visit. In and out. I'd go myself, but my knee operation is this week." I tried again. "I really don't know if I can." "It could be your last time seeing her," Mom said, and she let the sentence hang there. She didn't have to say anything else. She knew exactly where to put the hook. Then she added, sweet as syrup, "Gram adores you. She always called you her mini-me. She'd be so happy to see you. One last time." That did it. The guilt sank in and spread like cold water. I agreed. A couple hours later, I had an overnight bag in the passenger seat, and I was heading up into the mountains. The rain got worse as I climbed. Fog clung to the windshield, and the defroster barely kept up. I kept adjusting the air, trying to clear the glass, and I wasn't fully paying attention when I turned down the old road toward Graham's place. I was going too fast. I rounded a flooded corner, and the steering wheel suddenly pulled hard in my hands. My tires lost grip, like I'd driven onto ice. The truck hydroplaned, and for a few seconds I had no control at all. I pumped the brakes, heart slamming in my chest. I slid within a couple feet of a white utility truck parked on the side of the road. Its orange lights flashed and painted my windshield in a harsh, blinking glow. Two men in bright vests sat inside. They threw their hands up, furious. I think one of them flipped me off. It was hard to tell through the rain and the adrenaline. As I passed, I thought I heard someone shout something I couldn't make out. I kept going, jaw clenched, trying to breathe normally again. The dirt path up to Graham's house had turned into a river of mud. Halfway up the narrow climb, my tires spun and the truck sank. I tried to reverse. The tires just dug deeper. I tried forward. Same thing. Within seconds, I was stuck so badly the truck might as well have been cemented in place. Of course, my phone had no service. I sat there with both hands on the wheel, staring out into the rain, and for a moment, I wanted to slam my forehead into the steering wheel just to release the frustration. Then, I saw movement ahead. Through the pouring rain, I saw Graham walking toward me. She was wearing a pink nightgown, like she'd just gotten out of bed. She was waving her arms and shouting something, but the words were swallowed by rain and distance. I rolled the window down a few inches, and cold water blew into my ear. "Graham, is that you?" I yelled. She stopped and called back. "What can I help you with?" Her voice sounded clear, too clear. It threw me off. "Graham, it's fine. Go back inside," I shouted. "My truck is stuck. I'll handle it." "If a truck is stuck in mud," she said, as if she was reading from a handbook, "do this in order. First, stop spinning the tires. Spinning just digs you deeper." She kept coming, stepping into the mud like she didn't feel it. Rain hammered her thin shoulders. The mud was already up to her shins. "Graham, I know," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Please go back in. You're going to get sick out here. Put it in the lowest gear you have," she continued, waving one hand. The mud was up to her knees now, and she wasn't slowing down. "If it's four-wheel drive, engage 4 low, not 4 high." I stared at her, horrified. I didn't even know what she meant. She was wading deeper like she was trying to reach me no matter what it cost her. I opened the driver's door and stood up in the rain. "Graham, stop. Please go back inside. I'll come up to the house. I'm fine." She paused. Mud sloshed around her waist, soaking her nightgown. Rain washed her face in streaks. She smiled at me, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was a strange, fixed expression, like her face had frozen mid-thought. Her eyes looked too dark, pupils swallowing the whites. I'd seen that look before. The look right before she got mean. She turned slowly, as if she'd decided something, and started plodding back toward the house. As she walked away, she called over her shoulder, "You're tapping into something really foundational about the relationship between trucks and mud. The mud isn't just mud sinking your truck. It's like a canvas, and your truck—" "Graham, please just go inside," I shouted, louder than I meant to. Fear and exhaustion came out as anger. "I've got it." She didn't respond. She just kept walking, disappearing into the rain. I stood there breathing hard, rain stinging my face, and I couldn't tell how much of the cold, wet feeling was rain and how much was sweat. Something about her had felt wrong, even beyond the dementia. It was nice, in a twisted way, to hear her speak clearly, to hear her sound sharp and confident again. But it didn't match what I'd just seen. An old woman wading into mud like she didn't care if she drowned. I grabbed my bag, left the truck, and followed the path up to the house on foot. The garden was overflowing with black water. The plants along the walkway sagged under the storm. I splashed up the steps to the front door and went inside. The first thing I saw was Charlie curled up on the rug in the foyer. Charlie was Graham's cat, fat and spoiled and ancient. I couldn't believe he was still alive. I swear he'd been 15 years old when I was in college. He looked like a small furry pillow with legs. I closed the door gently behind me and crouched, reaching out to pet him. Maybe he smelled the rain on me. Maybe he hated strangers now. Maybe he was just Charlie. He extended his paw slowly, almost lazy, and then in a blink he raked my forearm 3 or 4 times. Deep, fast, like he'd been waiting for the chance. I hissed under my breath and jerked my arm back. Blood ran in thin lines down my skin. Charlie trotted off toward the kitchen like he'd done nothing wrong, his collar bell jingling bright and cheerful with every step. Graham came into the foyer a moment later. "Did that rotten cat get you?" she said sharply. "Charlie, you'd better hide, you nasty boy." Then she turned to me, and her voice softened. "Let's see what he did, sweetheart." Lightning flashed outside. The house lights flickered. The power wavered, and for a second, everything went dim and wrong. Graham stood absolutely still in the dark, like someone had hit pause on her. Her head dipped. She made a low, groaning sound, and I was hit with the smell of wet earth, strong and sudden, like someone had opened the barn door right next to my face. "Graham," I whispered. She lifted her head a fraction and said in a rough, husky voice, "Don't let them know." Graham blinked, and the moment vanished like it never happened. She grabbed my wrist and pulled me into the kitchen. She ran cold water over the scratches and dabbed at them with paper towel, like she'd done it 1,000 times. The whole scene was so normal, it made me feel like I'd imagined the strange part. But then I noticed her face. She looked good. Too good. The deep lines around her mouth seemed softened. Her hair looked fuller and had movement, like she'd just stepped out of a salon. Her skin looked smoother than I remembered, almost like she was a woman 20 years younger. And she wasn't wearing the mud-soaked pink nightgown anymore. She was wearing a blue striped blouse. I stared, trying to work it out. Maybe she'd changed quickly. Maybe I'd seen wrong in the rain. Maybe the dementia was making me doubt myself now. Graham wrapped my arm with a bandage. Then thunder rumbled again, and the power went out. "Have you been losing power a lot?" I asked. "It's not me," she said. I couldn't see her face clearly in the dark. I could hear the bandage still being wound around and around. "What do you mean?" "Graham, it's fine. That's enough." She didn't stop. The bandage tightened until my hand started to tingle. "Graham, it's too tight," I said, trying to pull back. She held on. The lights flickered back on, and Graham looked up at me with a knowing little smirk that didn't belong on her face. "Reality check, Margie," she said, like she was presenting to an audience. "Most scratches are fine, but ignoring one that's getting worse is where people mess up. The danger isn't the scratch. It's the infection you don't notice early." It sounded rehearsed, like something she'd heard from a video. I swallowed. "Okay, thanks." She didn't use any ointment, no antiseptic, nothing. Just the tight bandage. I tried not to argue. I kept listening for Charlie's bell, but the house was quiet besides the rain. I ended up on the living room couch, the one covered in plastic with an old floral print underneath. The walls were lined with framed family photos. I lay there staring at them, trying to anchor myself in familiar faces and memories. Maybe it was the sound of rain on the windows. Maybe it was being back in that house. Maybe it was the strange numbness in my tightly wrapped arm. Whatever it was, I fell asleep fast. I dreamed I was in a rainforest, running through wet green shadows. In the dream, I found an ancient stone ruin and had to jump off a waterfall to escape. I jumped, and then my hands slammed into tile. I woke up in darkness, on my hands and knees in the living room, inches from the corner of Graham's coffee table. My heart was racing. My knees and palms were wet with warm water, and it took me a second to understand why. Then, I heard it, a faucet running full blast. The power was out again, and the house was black. I scrambled toward the bathroom down the hall, slipping in puddles, following the sound of water. I threw the bathroom door open. Graham was in the tub, fully clothed, floating face down in an overflowing bath, like a body in a crime scene. Water poured over the sides onto the floor. Between her legs floated her iPad. The iPad speaker was muffled by water, but it kept repeating the same phrase in a flat, mechanical voice. Thinking. Longer. Better. Answer. Over and over. I lunged forward, turned the water off, and grabbed Graham under her arms. She was heavier than I expected, dead weight, and I dragged her out of the tub and into my lap, my back pressed against the wall. "Graham!" I yelled, smacking her upper back with the heel of my hand. "Graham, please." Nothing. I laid her on the floor and tried to do CPR the way I remembered from old training videos and panic. Press, press, press. Then I pinched her nose and breathed into her mouth. My hands shook so hard I could barely keep rhythm. I cried while I did it, not even caring that I was tasting bathwater and whatever else. On one attempt, her nose ran. On the next, I tasted mucus, and I almost gagged but kept going because I didn't know what else to do. Then the power snapped back on. The bathroom lights flared, harsh and bright, and Graham took the deepest breath I have ever heard. She sat upright in my arms, like something waking from a coffin. Her body jerked, and she let out a sound that wasn't a normal scream. It was a long, ragged wail, like her throat was ripping. She shook uncontrollably. I just held her. I didn't know what to say. I tried to ask what happened, how she got in the tub, why she was fully clothed, why the iPad kept talking like that, but she couldn't answer. She made broken sounds and rocked slightly, like a child. At some point, to calm her, I started brushing her hair. I don't know why. It just felt like something a person does when words don't work. Slowly, gently, I untangled it with my fingers. It seemed to soothe her. She leaned her head against my chest, breathing unevenly. As I brushed her hair away from her neck, I saw something behind her ear. 4 or 5 small black staples, fresh-looking, like surgery. I froze, staring. A translucent, clear fluid seeped from the area and gathered in a little shiny bead along the scar. I didn't say anything. My mind jumped to wild guesses. A facelift? Some kind of procedure? Something Uncle Bill didn't tell anyone about? Or something Graham did to herself? I helped her towel off, got her into bed, pulled the covers up, and turned on the TV. She liked Big Bang Theory for reasons I never understood. When she finally seemed calm and sleepy, I kissed her forehead and went to deal with the water that had flooded the bathroom. I cleaned for hours, mopped, wrung towels, tried to keep the floor from becoming a hazard. By the time I lay down, my whole body felt heavy. I woke a little after 3 a.m. to a sound that felt like it cracked my skull. It was loud in a way that didn't just hurt my ears. It felt like pressure releasing inside my head, like corks popping out of my ear canals. There was also a strange deflating sound, like a balloon losing air, and the combination made me clamp my hands over my ears, while my heart thumped wildly. Then, everything went too still, too quiet, until I heard purring. Close, I stared into the dark, trying to locate it. Something heavy shifted on my bed. A shadowy shape skittered off the mattress, crossed the floor with quick movements, and slipped out the doorway like a rat. It looked like Charlie, only bigger. I pulled the blanket up over my face and screamed. I couldn't stop, not at first. I was shaking so hard I thought I might faint. Then I saw, through the bedroom window, a light on in the barn. I was fully awake now. I remembered every story Mom and Uncle Bill had ever told about Graham wandering out there at night. I didn't want a mystery. I didn't want another crisis. I just wanted to get her back inside so we could both sleep. I threw on a robe over my pajamas and ran outside barefoot. The ground was soaked and cold. Rain misted my face. I hurried to the barn, and before I even reached it, I could tell the door was open. Inside was pitch black. "Graham?" I called. No answer. I turned on my phone flashlight and swept the beam across the barn. Old tools, empty stalls, the smell of wet wood and dirt. Nothing seemed out of place until I looked down. Near my feet was a dark splatter, like sprayed blood. It looked fresh, still wet. My throat hurt. The underside of my jaw felt sore. My ears ached. My nose dripped. I wiped it, and my fingers came back, coated in clear liquid. The same kind of clear liquid I'd seen behind Graham's ear. Something wasn't right with me either. Then I heard a shriek from the direction of the house. My stomach dropped. I sprinted back through the wet yard, slipped once, caught myself, and burst in through the sliding glass door. I raced down the hall and flung open Graham's bedroom door. She was in bed, asleep like nothing had happened. The TV was on, but now it was Twilight Zone reruns. Her breathing looked steady. The room looked normal. I stood there shaking, trying to understand how I could have heard that scream and then find her like this. I shut off her TV, checked the doors and windows, locked everything I could, and went back to bed with my heart still banging in my chest. The next day, the rain didn't stop. I woke up late and realized I had a Zoom meeting for work. I grabbed my laptop, plugged it in, and set up my phone hotspot, because Graham didn't have internet out here. When I clicked the Wi-Fi list, I saw my hotspot, but I also saw another network. Clara, Graham's name. I stared at it. Maybe Uncle Bill finally set her up with something. Maybe the Institute did. It felt wrong anyway, like the house had gained a new mouth. I joined the meeting. "Hi, everyone," I said, trying to sound normal. "Good to see you." On the screen, my coworker Stephanie froze mid-smile. Her voice glitched into a loop. "Marge, how have you been? How's the visit? How's the visit? How's the is it?" The same phrase, repeating like it was stuck. Lightning hit nearby and thunder shook the house. The lights cut out. In the dim, I looked into the kitchen and saw Graham's silhouette, standing there, still. "Graham?" I called. "You okay?" That was a big one. She didn't answer. The lights came back slowly, from dim to bright, and my stomach unclenched, when I realized the Graham I'd seen was just a chair with one of her coats draped over it. I laughed under my breath, weak and embarrassed. I was jumping at everything. I went into the kitchen for coffee and saw a mug already on the counter. The back door was wide open, letting rain blow in, and there was Graham. She stood outside in the pouring rain, half hidden behind the garage wall about 30 yards away, staring at me with wide eyes. The second our eyes met, she moved fast, darting out of sight. "Graham," I called, stepping into the doorway, "can we please calm down? It's just me, Margie. Your mini-me." I tried to put on my shoes, but by the time I got one on, she was already halfway down the driveway. I gave up and ran out barefoot after her. For an old woman, she moved like she had springs in her legs. I lost sight of her near the tree line. I scanned the woods, the driveway, the edges of the property, calling her name until my voice sounded raw. Nothing. Something in me cracked. I stood there in the rain and realized I couldn't do this. I couldn't chase an elderly woman through woods in a storm while also trying to keep my job and keep my sanity. I trudged back toward the house, thinking I'd call my mom and tell her to come get me. Forget the guilt. Forget the promises. This was beyond me. I rushed inside, grabbed my laptop, and opened it again. Right as it booted up, I heard the back door snap shut. I muted the call. "Graham, that you?" No answer. I unmuted. "Sorry, everyone. I'm back." That was when Graham jumped onto my back. Her fingers clawed into my shoulders, through my robe. The laptop slipped from my hands and crashed onto the floor. I heard voices from my meeting, sudden and alarmed. "Marge, are you okay? Should we call 911? Someone shouted. "No," I gasped. "No, I'm fine. It's fine." I managed to slam the meeting window closed, just as Graham struck me in the face with her iPad. The hit rang my head like a bell. I fell off the couch, face first. Before I could get up, she grabbed my throat and shoved the back of my head against the floor. She put her weight on me, pinning me like she was trying to grind me into the wood. "You're with them," she screeched. "Admit it." My mind went blank with panic. I kicked backward and caught her hard in the stomach. She doubled over, wheezing, and tried to stumble away. I snatched up my laptop and, without thinking, threw it at her legs. It hit her knee, and she collapsed forward into the hallway wall. The top of her head punched through the drywall with a sickening crunch. She made a muffled animal sound and then pushed herself upright, holding her stomach, swaying like she might collapse again. She ran down the hall into her bedroom, bouncing off the walls, sobbing. I stood there, shaking, staring at my broken laptop in my own hands, like they belonged to someone else. I had just hurt my sick grandmother, badly. I'd always been afraid of her episodes, but I'd never imagined I'd be the one to put her through a wall. I sat outside her bedroom door and apologized through it. I told her I loved her. I'd begged her to answer me. Nothing. Eventually, I retreated to my own room and locked the door, not sure whether I was protecting myself from her or her from me. A couple hours later, I woke up to the smell of food so good it felt like it reached into my chest and squeezed. Warmth drifted down the hall from the kitchen, and under it, I heard something I hadn't heard in years. Graham humming. It was soft and steady, the way she used to hum when she cooked. I didn't even know what tune it was, but it flooded me with childhood. It made my throat tighten. I got out of bed and followed the smell. In the hallway, I saw her moving between rooms, only in glimpses, like shadows crossing the light. "Is that your chicken pot pie?" I asked. "It smells like it." Graham smiled at me like nothing had happened. "You know it," she said, and she laughed a little, playful, shaking a wooden spoon at me. She looked alive, present, almost like the version of her I remembered. "You ready to eat, Margie?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," I said, and I pulled out a chair at the table. She served me a slice on a piece of fine china, with pale blue designs so detailed it looked like art. The pot pie smelled perfect. It tasted even better. I ate too fast. I asked for seconds. She gave them to me with a proud little smile. "I'm glad you like it," she said. "It's even better than I remember," I told her. "Well," she said, smiling wider, "you haven't tried this one before, silly?" I laughed, thinking she meant I hadn't had her cooking in a long time. I ate the second slice until all that remained was gravy around the edges and a small lump of meat in the center. I stabbed the lump with my fork. It felt firm, like a dense little bite. I lifted it to my mouth and bit down. Something hard rang against my teeth, a sound I knew instantly because I'd heard it 1,000 times. A small bell. "Where's Charlie?" I asked slowly, barely able to form words. Graham looked down at her plate. "He was a very naughty boy," she said, calm as if she was talking about a spilled drink. Heat rushed through my body, sharp and dizzying. I reached into my mouth with shaking fingers and pulled out a small brass bell. Charlie's collar bell. My stomach heaved. I didn't even make it to the bathroom. I threw up violently, over and over, until there was nothing left. Chairs scraped. My legs gave out. The room spun, and then went black. When I came to, I was on the barn floor. Dirt pressed against my cheek. My head felt heavy and wrong, like I'd been hit. The air smelled like old hay and wet wood, and something sour underneath. Graham was crouched near me, face close, eyes bright with urgency. "Hurry up," she said. "He's almost awake." She grabbed the back of my head and then let go, and my skull thudded back into the dirt. I blinked through blurry vision and saw a huge hole in the barn floor, deeper than any normal pit. Graham stepped down into it like she'd done it many times. She pulled her hair back, and I saw scars on both sides of her head, the same area where I'd seen staples earlier. She pushed 2 fingers into the scarred openings, like she was reaching into pockets under her skin. When she pulled them out, her fingers were coated in blood and that same clear fluid. "He's almost had his fill," she said, excited, like someone talking about cookies in the oven. "Who?" I croaked. My voice barely worked. "He's going to need some of yours too," Graham said. "He's a hungry boy." I forced myself onto one elbow and looked down into the hole. There was a corpse down there, a dried-out body with skin pulled tight, the kind of dead you see in old movies. I knew without anyone saying it that it was my grandpa, and Graham had both her hands inside its mouth. Not near the mouth. Inside it, like she was adjusting something in the jaw, like she was feeding it, like she was waking it up. The body shuddered under her hands, a small movement that should not have been possible. I didn't stay to see what happened next. I staggered to my feet and ran. I burst out of the barn and slammed the door shut behind me. My hands shook so badly it took 2 tries to turn the lock, but I managed it. Almost immediately, something heavy crashed into the door from the inside, splintering the frame. The impact made dust fall from the wood. Graham's voice came through the door, strangely gentle. "Come now, Mini-Me. It's time to me." Story 3. Everyone's always chasing the same impossible checklist when they apartment hunt. Big enough to feel like a real home, not so expensive it eats your entire paycheck. and close enough to work that you don't lose your life to commuting. I'd been scrolling listings for weeks, watching anything decent vanish within hours. I was fresh out of school, still staring down student loans, and I'd already accepted that I'd end up in a tiny studio with thin walls and a roommate I barely knew. Then, somehow, I found it. The building was old, the kind of place with narrow hallways and doors that didn't all match, because they'd been replaced over the decades. The elevator was slow and a little too small, and it always made this faint whining sound as it climbed, like it was complaining about the effort. But the lobby was clean, the stairwell didn't stink, the mailboxes weren't ripped open, and the whole place had a quietness that felt rare in a city like this. No loud music bleeding through walls, no strangers hanging around at night. The landlady lived in the building too, 3 floors above the unit she was showing me. When I met her, she was tall and older, with tight shoulders like she carried stress in her posture. Her voice was soft, almost careful, like she'd learned to speak gently, even when she didn't feel gentle inside. She greeted me like she actually wanted me there, not like I was another application she had to process. The apartment itself made me suspicious immediately. 2 bedrooms, a big living room, a balcony that wasn't just a decorative ledge, but a real balcony you could sit on. The kitchen wasn't huge, but it had space to cook without elbowing the counters. And the best part, it was only a few blocks from my office. I could walk to work. No subway crush. No winter waiting on a platform. No paying for rides when I was exhausted. Just walking. I walked through each room expecting the catch to reveal itself. A smell, a leak, a broken window that didn't close, a neighbor's TV blasting through the wall, something. But it was clean, quiet. Even the floors felt solid under my feet. When the landlady finally told me the rent, I just stood there. I actually thought I'd misheard her. I asked her to repeat it, trying not to sound desperate. She gave me this small, tired smile and explained that she offered a large discount to young women who were new to the city. She said she'd been one herself once, and she remembered how hard it was to build a life from scratch, how easy it was to get swallowed by the cost of everything. She said she liked helping someone get on their feet. She said she preferred tenants who were quiet, responsible, and just starting out. Maybe I should have questioned it more. Maybe I should have asked why she didn't advertise that discount, or why she was willing to lose money for a stranger. But I didn't. I was relieved. I was excited. I was 22 and standing in a place that felt like the start of my real life. I signed the lease the same day. Moving in felt like stepping into the future I'd been chasing. My dad drove up with me and helped carry boxes, complaining about the parking situation the whole time but smiling anyway. He tightened a loose hinge on one of the cabinet doors. He fixed a sticky window latch. He walked around the place like a father inspecting a nest, making sure it wasn't going to hurt his kid. That first night, after he left, I sat on the living room floor surrounded by half-open boxes and felt something close to peace. I thought, this is it. This is where everything finally starts. The only strange thing that happened that night felt so minor that I didn't even tell anyone about it at first. I was unpacking some tools my dad had left behind. Just in case, he'd said, because old buildings always have little problems. The toolbox slipped off a chair and landed straight on my foot. The corner caught the side of my big toe, hard enough to slice it open. It hurt like hell. I hopped around the kitchen, swearing, and the blood startled me more than the pain. I cleaned it in the bathroom sink, put pressure on it, wrapped it up with a bandage, and told myself it wasn't a big deal. Just clumsy. Just bad luck. I figured the next day I'd take a better look. But when I woke up, The cut was gone. Not healing, not scabbed over, not even tender. Gone, like it had happened a long time ago, and my skin had never been broken at all. I stared at my toe for a full minute, turning my foot different ways in the light, looking for any sign I was imagining it. There wasn't even a mark. I told myself it was a shallow cut, and I'd exaggerated it in the moment. That I'd been tired. That the lighting in the bathroom had made it look worse. Then I went to work and let it fade into the background. The first month was perfect, or close enough that I didn't want to jinx it by saying so out loud. Most mornings I sat on the balcony with scrambled eggs and coffee, watching the city wake up. I liked the feeling of being above street level, like I could see people moving through their lives without being pulled into the noise yet. The air up there smelled cleaner. I could hear birds sometimes. In the early mornings, there were moments when the city felt almost gentle. I was young, in the biggest city I'd ever lived in, with a job I actually liked. I was making my own money, building my own routine, and coming home to a place that felt like mine. The apartment mattered more than I realized. It wasn't just space. It was proof that I had landed somewhere. The first time something felt off was after a night out with coworkers. We'd gone for drinks after work. One of those bonding nights where you laugh too loudly and tell stories you wouldn't tell sober. Someone took a bunch of photos. Later, when I got home, I was in that half-tipsy state where you scroll through your phone on autopilot. I opened Instagram and saw a photo of myself from earlier that night. And I looked different. Not different like a bad angle. Not different like I'd gained weight or had a bad hair day. Something subtler and worse. I looked older, tired. My skin looked dull, like it didn't hold light the same way. There were faint shadows under my eyes that hadn't been there before. My smile looked like it took effort. I zoomed in and out, then pulled up older pictures. Same face, same features, but it didn't look like the same person wearing them. I tried to shrug it off. Alcohol can do that. Bad lighting can do that. Phone cameras can do that. But the feeling didn't go away. Over the next week, I started noticing it in the mirror too. My skin got drier. I started waking up exhausted no matter how long I slept. I drank more coffee and it barely touched the tiredness. One morning, I couldn't stop yawning through a meeting and felt embarrassed because my boss was right there. Later, during a presentation, I felt a strange pain in my lower back, like a dull ache that shouldn't have belonged to someone my age. At first I told myself it was stress. First real job, new city, new routine. Maybe I was pushing harder than I thought. Maybe I wasn't eating well enough. Maybe my body was adjusting. Still, I went to a doctor because the back pain and fatigue didn't feel normal. The doctor asked the usual questions: sleep, diet, exercise, work hours, anxiety. He ran basic tests and told me I was probably burned out. He recommended rest, hydration, better nutrition, less screen time at night, all the usual things people say when they can't find a clear cause. I wanted to believe him, so I kept going. Day after day, I got used to feeling like that. I stopped going to the gym because I never had the energy. I stopped going out because the thought of socializing made me tired before I even left the apartment. Most nights I stayed in and watched random shows, letting the hours pass without really feeling them. Somewhere in that stretch of time, the apartment stopped feeling like a prize and started feeling like a cave I couldn't climb out of. Every month, I paid the rent the way the landlady asked. She didn't want checks mailed. She didn't want an app transfer. She wanted it in an envelope, slid under her door upstairs. I thought it was old-fashioned, but I didn't argue. It was a small thing for a big discount. After the first week, I almost never saw her. I'd hear faint footsteps in the hall sometimes, or the elevator moving at odd hours, but I didn't run into her. She didn't text. She didn't call. She didn't check in. It was like she'd handed me the keys and disappeared. About 2 months after I moved in, I found my first gray hair. It was a Sunday morning. I was brushing my hair while listening to a podcast, half awake, half thinking about everything I had to do that week. The hair caught the light and looked silver against the darker strands. I froze with the brush in my hand and stared at it like it was a bug. I plucked it out and held it between my fingers, turning it slowly, hoping I'd imagined the color. But it stayed gray no matter how I tilted it. People get a gray hair early sometimes. I knew that. Stress can do it. Genetics can do it. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. Except after that, it didn't stop. Over the next couple of weeks, I found more. Not just 1 or 2. Enough that I started checking my hairline under bright light. Enough that I started wearing my hair differently to hide it from myself. My coworkers noticed before I wanted them to. Not the gray hair exactly, but everything else. My face looked thinner. My skin looked dry and lifeless. I lost weight without trying. Over 20 pounds in what felt like no time. People started asking if I was eating, asking if I was sick, asking if I was okay. My boss called me into his office one afternoon. He didn't sound angry. He sounded concerned. He asked if I needed time off, if something was happening at home, if I needed help. I didn't know what to tell him. I'd been to doctors. I'd done the tests they suggested. They kept saying stress, burnout, change of environment, depression. But the truth was, I wasn't even working that hard compared to some people. I wasn't pulling insane hours. I wasn't living on 3 hours of sleep. I wasn't partying. If anything, I was doing less and less every week because I felt like I couldn't do more. Then Thanksgiving came, and I decided to go back home to my parents. At first, it was just because I missed them and I wanted a break from the city. But under that was another thought I didn't want to admit. I needed to see if I felt better somewhere else. I needed proof that I wasn't just slowly falling apart for no reason. The first night back in my childhood room, I felt different almost immediately. The air smelled like my old house, like laundry detergent and wood, and whatever my mom cooked earlier. I slept deeper than I had in months. When I woke up, my skin already looked better. Not perfect, but less dull. I had energy again. Real energy. I walked downstairs and actually wanted breakfast. I laughed at something my dad said, and it came out easily instead of feeling forced. For one day, I believed it was all stress, that the city had drained me, that my job had gotten into my head, that I just needed rest and family and familiarity. But my parents didn't see what I felt. They looked at me like I was a stranger, wearing my own face. My mom kept staring at me, the way mothers stare when they're trying not to show panic. My dad got quiet, and when my dad gets quiet, it's never a good sign. They asked me if I was eating, if I was sleeping, if I was sick. My mom kept touching my arm and my cheek, like she was checking temperature without saying so. Then came the worst moment. I was in the bathroom with my mom, brushing my teeth beside her the way I used to when I was a kid. At some point, I glanced at the mirror and really looked. My mom and I looked the same age. Not identical, not twins, but close enough that my stomach flipped. She looked at the mirror too, then looked at me, and her face changed as she realized I'd noticed. I remember standing there with toothpaste foam in my mouth, gripping the sink, feeling the room tilt. I remember the cold of the faucet handle under my palm. I remember my mom whispering my name like she was trying to pull me back into reality. That's when I knew it wasn't just stress. I stayed with my parents for 2 weeks. I told my job I needed time off for health reasons, and they didn't fight me. During those 2 weeks, I felt better physically, but mentally, I was spiraling. I kept thinking about the apartment. I kept thinking about the first month, how perfect it felt. I kept thinking about the toe cut that vanished overnight. I kept thinking about that feeling of waking up exhausted, no matter what. And I started thinking about the rent discount, the way the landlady had smiled, the way she said she liked helping young women new to the city, the way she'd vanished after I moved in. By the time I returned, I wasn't going back to my life. I was going back to get out. The second I walked into the apartment, the air felt heavy again, like the building itself carried weight. I didn't even unpack my bag. I started shoving clothes into suitcases. I grabbed whatever mattered and left the rest. 2 suitcases, 1 backpack, my laptop, my documents. Anything else could be replaced. I just needed to leave. I rushed to the elevator. There was another woman inside. She was tall and athletic, wearing workout clothes and sunglasses even though we were indoors. She looked like she was in her early 20s, the kind of face that belonged in an ad. Smooth skin, strong jawline, clean posture, like she was made out of confidence. At first, I barely registered her. My brain was focused on escape. Then, I looked again. Something about her was familiar, in a way that made my heart stutter. The way she stood with tight shoulders, the shape of her mouth, the angle of her nose, the calmness in her expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. It took me a second to understand what my mind was trying to do. Then, it hit me like a slap. She looked exactly like the landlady, only decades younger. I stared without meaning to. The woman noticed. She turned her face away quickly, like she didn't want me to see her profile. When the elevator reached the ground floor, she moved to step out fast. I didn't let her. I grabbed her arm and turned her toward me. The moment I did, I knew I was right. I didn't need her to say anything. I didn't need her to confirm it. It was in the bones of her face. It was the same person in a different time. It was the landlady. I started yelling. I don't even remember exactly what I said, just that my voice came out harsh and shaking and loud enough that it echoed in the lobby. I demanded to know what she'd done to me. I demanded to know why I looked the way I looked. I demanded to know where my time went. She tried to pull away, and when I tightened my grip, she shoved me. Hard. Not a push to get free, a shove that meant to throw me off balance. I fell backwards and hit the back of my head on the lobby floor. I don't remember losing consciousness. It didn't feel like blacking out slowly. It felt like the world simply cut off, like a light switching off. When I woke up, I was in a hospital room. Bright lights, a pale ceiling, the soft beep of machines, nurses moving in the hallway beyond the door. My throat was dry, my head throbbed, my mouth tasted like metal. The landlady sat next to my bed, not young anymore, older again like the woman I'd first met. Tall, tight shoulders, soft voice waiting behind a guilty expression. She looked tired, almost sad. She apologized for pushing me. She said she didn't have a choice. She said she panicked. I didn't care about the apology. I wanted answers so badly my hands were shaking under the blanket. Through tears, she told me the same thing had happened to her. She said she moved into that apartment about a year ago, and before her, there had been another landlady. It took me a minute to even understand what she meant. I remember staring at her, trying to picture her living in my apartment, young the way she was in the elevator. I asked how it worked. I asked what the apartment was. I asked what she did to me. She said she didn't know. Exactly. She said all she knew was what the last landlady told her, and what she'd experienced herself. She said the two apartments, hers and the one she rented out, had been connected since the building was constructed, not connected by a hallway or a hidden door, connected in a deeper way. She said, one drains time while the other gives it, like a straw. She said that when you live in the wrong one, you don't just get tired, you get used up. You age in weeks the way you should age in years. And whoever lives in the other one gets it. I wanted to call it a lie. I wanted to scream at her that it was impossible, that time isn't a thing you can siphon out of someone like money out of an ATM. But I had seen her in the elevator, young, strong, wearing my stolen years like a new outfit. I didn't have the luxury of disbelief. She stood up, wiped her eyes, and placed a key in my hand. She told me both apartments were mine now, and she was moving out. I asked her what I was supposed to do with them. She gave me a small, tired smile and said, "Rent it out." Like it was obvious, like it was the only answer. After she left, I lay in that hospital bed, staring at the key on my palm. It felt heavy. Not physically heavy, but heavy with what it meant. A choice I didn't ask for. A problem nobody would believe. I thought about going to the police. I pictured myself trying to explain that an apartment stole my time and made my landlord younger. I pictured their faces, polite and skeptical. I pictured them asking if I was on drugs, if I'd had a breakdown, if I was hallucinating. I thought about trying to find her, forcing her to fix it. But how? What could she do even if I dragged her back? She'd already told me she didn't understand the mechanism. Just the pattern. Victim becomes landlord. Landlord becomes young. The building stays quiet. The city keeps moving. I thought about going back to my parents. But what would that change? It wouldn't give me those months back. It wouldn't restore my face. It wouldn't erase the gray hair or the dryness or the way my body now felt older than it should. I'm 22, but my body is decades older. And when I look in the mirror, I can tell it won't reverse on its own. Whatever was taken from me doesn't come back because I want it to. So I did what she told me to do. Out of desperation, out of panic, out of the ugly instinct to survive at any cost, I listed the apartment on the same website where I found it. I moved into the landlady's unit upstairs. The messages came in almost immediately. People asking about the price. People saying the location was perfect. People saying it looked too good to be true. The first showing is today. That's why I'm writing this now. Not because I expect anyone to have a solution, but because I need to admit what I'm doing. I need to put the truth somewhere, outside my own skull. Part of me keeps saying I don't have to do this, that there has to be another way, that I could just accept what happened, leave the city, live out my life with whatever years I have left, and never pass this curse on to someone else. But the other part of me screams louder. It says I don't have a choice. It says it's either this or accepting that my youth is gone forever, that I'm trapped in an old body while my life has barely started. It says I can't live like that. It says I won't survive that. The girl coming to see the place sounded young on the phone. Hopeful, excited. She talked fast, like she couldn't believe she'd found something so good. She said she's new to the city. She said she wants a fresh start. She said she can't wait to have the best time of her life here. I remember sounding just like that. And the worst part is, if she takes the apartment, she probably will have the best time of her life here. For a little while, until she starts looking in the mirror and wondering why her face doesn't match her age anymore. Until she wakes up exhausted and can't explain it. Until the years begin to disappear, quietly, like money slipping out of an account she didn't know was open. I keep telling myself I'll warn her, that when she arrives, I'll say something, that I'll stop this. But my hand keeps tightening around the key, and my body keeps reminding me how it feels to be used up. And I don't know which part of me is going to win when she knocks on the door. Story 4. The first thing I noticed about the shuffling was that it never followed me outside. I didn't understand that detail at first. It didn't feel important. It was just something I filed away, because it was strange, like noticing a stain on a ceiling tile, and then forgetting about it until you're lying awake at night. I only started paying real attention when the sound stopped being easy to explain. Inside the apartment, I would hear it. Outside the apartment, I wouldn't. The sound stayed with me in a way that felt personal. If I walked from the living room into the short hallway that led to the bedroom and bathroom, I'd hear it behind me. If I went toward the front door, it stayed right there, always just out of reach, always a half step late. But if I opened the door and stepped into the building corridor, the sound stopped immediately. It didn't fade. It didn't get quieter. It ended like someone cut an audio file mid-second. Like something had reached a line it couldn't cross. At the time, I told myself it was my imagination. Old buildings make noises. Pipes tick. Floorboards creak. You hear a neighbor's TV through a wall, and your brain turns it into a voice. If you're stressed, your mind tries to give random sounds a pattern. None of that explained why the shuffling matched my footsteps. It was always delayed by the smallest amount of time, just enough that I could hear the difference between my step and whatever came after it. If I took a step forward, I'd hear a faint drag behind me half a second later. Not a loud footfall, not a heavy stomp. More like someone moving carefully, like they were trying not to be heard, and failing. The first time I really noticed the timing, I stopped walking. The shuffling stopped too. I stood there in the hallway, holding my breath, without meaning to, waiting for another sound. My fridge hummed from the kitchen. Water moved somewhere in the walls. The light above the kitchen entrance flickered with a weak buzz that made me want to replace the bulb, but I hadn't gotten around to it. I turned around. There was nothing there, just the narrow hallway, the closed bedroom door, the bathroom door, and the same stale smell that had been clinging to the place since I moved in. I'd only been living in the apartment for a week when it started. It wasn't a great place, but it was the only one I could afford without taking on a roommate I didn't know. It was in an old building with narrow stairs, a small lobby that smelled like dust, and a landlord who seemed like the kind of guy who'd fix something only if it was actively on fire. The unit itself came with a few leftovers from the previous tenant, a table with one wobbly leg, a couch that had sunk in the middle, a microwave that worked, but only if you slammed the door hard enough. The walls had that dull yellow tint you only see in places that haven't been painted in decades. I could tell someone had tried to clean them at some point, because there were streaks around light switches and corners where hands would have touched. The smell was there from the first day. I cleaned everything when I moved in. It wasn't a quick wipe down. I cleaned like I was trying to erase someone else's life. I scrubbed the floors on my hands and knees until my knuckles hurt. I bleached the counters. I wiped out the cabinets, the closet shelves, even the top of the door frames. I washed the curtains that came with the place and ran baking soda over the carpet. I left windows open for hours even though the hallway outside my unit always felt warmer than it should. The smell didn't change. It reminded me of old laundry that had been left wet for too long. Not exactly mildew, but close to it, like clothes that were washed and then forgotten in a washer, then dried anyway, and then folded into a drawer, still holding that sour, sleepy scent. It wasn't strong enough to make me gag, but it was steady. It lived in the corners of the apartment, like a thing that had settled in. 2 days after I moved in, I heard the first shuffle. It was so quiet, I almost missed it. I was walking from the bedroom to the kitchen to get a glass of water, and behind me, I heard something drag lightly across the floor. My first thought was that my shoe had caught on the carpet edge. I looked down, adjusted my step, and kept going. Then it happened again when I walked back. Then again the next day. At first it didn't scare me. It annoyed me. I didn't want one more problem in a place that already felt like a compromise. I told myself it was pipes, or a neighbor, or the building settling. I told myself I'd stop noticing it once I got used to the apartment's sounds. That lasted until I realized the sound stopped whenever I stopped walking. Once I noticed that, I couldn't unnotice it. I started testing it without even meaning to. If I walked slowly down the hallway, the shuffling stayed behind me, a fraction of a beat late. If I sped up, it sped up too. If I took a sudden step to the side, I'd hear a quick little correction behind me, like someone trying not to bump into the wall. One evening, I did something that made my skin go cold. I was walking toward the bathroom, heard the shuffle, and I spun around hard fast enough that the motion made me dizzy. The sound cut off in the middle of a step, not like it stopped after finishing the movement, like it froze halfway through, like something had lifted a foot and never set it down. The hallway behind me was empty. No shadow, no shape, no movement. I stood there waiting for something else to happen, because my brain had already decided that if I just waited long enough, I'd see the explanation. A mouse. A hanging coat. Something shifting in the air vents. Nothing happened. After that, I started looking for anything I could blame. I checked the ceiling vents. I checked the baseboards for gaps where a rodent could come through. I checked under the couch. I set traps, not because I believed there was a mouse, but because I wanted proof that I was doing something. I checked the mirrors next. The bathroom mirror first, then the small one in the hallway that the previous tenant had left hanging crooked. I walked past it slowly, then quickly, turning my head to catch movement. I told myself that if there was someone behind me, I'd see it in the mirror. I never did. Then I tried recording. I set my phone on the kitchen counter so it could see the hallway. I hit record and walked away from the camera and back again. I made myself move in different patterns. Slow, fast, stop, start, turn around, stand still. When I watched the video back, it showed me walking alone. No second shadow, no blur moving behind me, no door opening, no hint that anything had happened. But I could still hear the shuffle as I moved, clear as ever, even while the video showed empty space. That's when I started thinking maybe it was a sound inside my own head. Not a mental illness, not like voices telling me things, but something like tinnitus mixed with stress. A sound my brain created and then pinned to my movement. It sounded possible. It sounded safer than the alternative. The building actually has cameras outside every unit door. That was one of the few things I liked about it. There were small dome cameras mounted in the corridor, aimed down each hallway section. They weren't fancy, but they were there. I asked the landlord if I could check the hallway footage. I tried to keep it casual when I brought it up. like I was just being careful. I told him I wanted to make sure no one had been entering my place when I wasn't home, because I'd had a bad experience in my last apartment, with a maintenance guy coming in without notice. He didn't look surprised or concerned. He looked bored, like I'd asked him where the nearest grocery store was. He pulled the footage up on his computer in the office, near the lobby. The screen showed grainy angles of the corridor outside my unit. Timestamps. Black and white video that made everyone look like a ghost. We scrolled through a couple days. The recordings showed me leaving in the morning and coming back at night. No one else. No one sneaking up behind me. No one standing outside my door. The hallway stayed empty when I wasn't there. I felt embarrassed for even asking, but I also felt relief. If no one was outside my door, then at least I wasn't dealing with a real stalker. The shuffling still followed me inside. After that, it wasn't just the sound. A few days later, I noticed some of my clothes were missing. It started small. A sock that didn't come back from the laundry. A t-shirt I couldn't find when I was getting dressed. I assumed I'd shoved them into the wrong drawer while unpacking, or that one had slipped behind the washer in the building's shared laundry room. But then more small things vanished. A pair of underwear, another sock, a hoodie I knew I'd left on the back of a chair. I searched the apartment in the careful, frustrated way you search when you're trying not to panic. I checked under furniture. I checked closets. I checked the hamper. I checked the trash, because sometimes your brain does something stupid, and you throw something away without realizing it. The missing clothes didn't show up. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. People lose clothing items all the time. Socks disappear. Hoodies get left places. I was tired. I was distracted. That explanation didn't fully convince me, but it kept me from spiraling. Then the smell started getting stronger. It wasn't the whole apartment at first. It gathered in one area like smoke. It was strongest near the hallway. And then I noticed it on the back of my shirts, right around the collar. I didn't put it together until one night when I took off my shirt before a shower. I pulled the fabric over my head, and my skin prickled because the collar felt wet. Not damp like sweat. Wet like it had been pressed against something moist. I held it up to my nose, and the smell hit me. It wasn't just old laundry anymore. It was something worse layered under it. Something thick and sour and wrong. It smelled like saliva, like drool. I stood there in my bathroom, staring at the shirt, my stomach tight, trying to think of a normal reason for a collar to be wet like that. I lived alone. No one slept in my bed. No one hugged me from behind. I hadn't spilled water on myself. That night, I washed every piece of clothing I owned. I stuffed loads into the washer until my quarters ran out. I used extra detergent. I used hot water. I rewashing things that didn't even need it because I wanted the smell gone. The next day, it was back. Not on everything, just enough, and the shuffling got louder over time. Not by much. It didn't become a stomp. It stayed careful, quiet, and close. But it got clear enough that I couldn't pretend it was just building noise. Sometimes, when I walked through the apartment, I felt something on the back of my neck. Not a touch, just warmth, like someone standing too close behind you in a line. Like body heat. Whenever I felt it, my shoulders would tense, and I'd get that instinctive urge to step away from the wall, to give myself space. But stepping away didn't help, because the warmth stayed right where it always was, just behind me. I tried sleeping with the bedroom door locked. It didn't help. I tried sleeping with the hallway light on. That didn't help either. The light made the apartment feel even emptier, and emptiness is its own kind of fear. At some point, I started timing my movements without realizing it. I'd walk and count in my head. 1, 2, 3. Each count matched my step. And then, half a beat behind, the shuffle. Always a half step late. Always like an echo that wasn't made of sound, but of movement. I told myself that if something wanted to hurt me, it would have done it already. That's what people tell themselves when they're trying to live with fear. If it's been here for weeks and I'm still fine, it must not be dangerous. But fear doesn't work like that. Fear collects details and turns them into patterns. I started avoiding the hallway. I took longer routes through my small apartment, which was ridiculous because there wasn't much space to begin with. I started leaving lights on so I wouldn't have to walk into dark rooms. I started showering fast, like being naked was a risk now. Then, a few nights ago, the shuffling stopped completely. It was so sudden that I didn't realize it right away. I was walking from the bedroom to the kitchen, and I felt that familiar tension in my shoulders, waiting for the sound. Nothing came. I walked the hallway again, slower, listening. Nothing. I walked faster, almost jogging, and stopped hard. Silence. For the first time since moving in, the apartment sounded normal. Just appliances, just distant neighbors, just rain tapping lightly against a window. I stood there, smiling like an idiot, relief flooding me. I thought whatever had been following me had finally given up, or that I'd finally stopped hearing it because my brain had moved on. But the silence didn't make me feel safe for long. Things didn't go back to normal. In fact, something else started happening, and it was harder to explain than a sound. I started doing things without deciding to. It wasn't like blacking out. It wasn't like waking up in a different room with no memory. It was subtler than that, and maybe that's why it scared me more. It was like I would move and only notice afterward that I hadn't chosen to. Yesterday, I opened the front door and stepped into the hallway outside my unit before realizing I hadn't planned to leave. I stood out there with the door open behind me, staring down the building corridor, feeling stupid and exposed. The corridor smelled like old carpet and cleaning chemicals. The camera above the hallway light blinked its tiny red dot. I stepped back inside quickly and locked the door. My hands shook on the deadbolt. I told myself I must have been going to check the mail, or take out the trash, or do anything that made sense. But I wasn't holding keys. I wasn't even wearing shoes. This morning, I stood in the kitchen for a long time before noticing I was facing the wall. Not the counter, not the sink. The wall, blank and close, like I'd walked right up to it and stopped. I don't remember walking there. I remember sitting on the couch with my phone. I remember reading something. I remember thinking, I should eat breakfast. Then the next clear moment was me standing in the kitchen, inches from the wall, my nose picking up that sour smell stronger than ever. I could feel my breath bouncing back at me off the paint. I backed away slowly and sat down, trying not to panic, trying not to tell myself stories. The smell hasn't gone away either. If anything, it's stronger now. It's not just on my clothes. It's on my skin. I shower and scrub until my body feels raw, and an hour later, I catch it again when I turn my head, like it's rising from the back of my neck. Sometimes I wake up and it's already there, like it's been breathing on me while I slept. I checked my sheets. I washed them twice. I bought new detergent. I opened windows even though the building air always feels stale. Nothing helped. A few minutes ago, I stood up from this chair and walked to the door again. I don't remember deciding to do that. I remember typing. I remember telling myself I should write it down, because I needed a record, because I didn't trust my own memory anymore. I remember thinking that if I wrote it clearly, it would become less confusing, less slippery. Then I realized I was standing at the door, staring at the handle. My hand hovered inches away from it, like it was waiting for permission. I stepped back and sat down again, heart pounding, trying to shake the feeling off, like it was a cold mist. But the pull didn't go away. I keep thinking about the hallway outside my apartment, about the stairs at the end of it, about the street outside the building, where the air is cold and open and full of normal noise. I keep thinking about how the shuffling never followed me out there. I keep thinking about that invisible line it couldn't cross. And I keep thinking, in a way that doesn't feel like my own thought, that maybe it didn't want to follow me outside. Maybe it wanted me to come to it. My hands have been hovering over the keyboard for a while now. I can feel my fingers twitch slightly, like they're getting ready to stop. My eyes keep sliding back to the door. My attention keeps drifting away from the screen no matter how hard I try to hold it here. Just now, I feel compelled to stop writing. I'm looking at the door again. I want to go outside. Story 5. I moved into this apartment 3 months ago, and for a while I honestly thought I'd gotten lucky. It's an old studio in the city with the kind of details landlords usually charge extra for. The ceilings are high enough that sound seems to float. The windows are tall and a little drafty. The floors are real wood, worn smooth in the spots where people have walked for decades. The building itself has that old New York, old Boston, old Chicago feeling. Even though it's not fancy, it creaks and sighs the way older buildings do, like it's always adjusting to the weight of people living inside it. The rent is what sold me. It wasn't dirt cheap, but compared to everything else I looked at, it felt like a steal. When you've been searching for a place long enough, you start lowering your standards without admitting it. At some point, you're willing to accept a weird smell in the hallway or a window that doesn't lock perfectly if the number on the lease looks reasonable. This place didn't even have that many obvious problems. The only thing that bothered me, the only thing I kept noticing even after I unpacked, was a single floorboard next to my bed. It sat right beside my nightstand, in that narrow strip of floor between the bed frame and the wall. Every time I got in or out of bed, or even just shifted my weight while lying there, that board would groan, not a little creak like the rest of the floor. It made a long, complaining sound, like someone was dragging a chair leg slowly across wood. At first I thought it was kind of funny. Old building, old floors, it came with the apartment. I even joked about it to a friend on the phone, saying my floor had opinions about my sleep schedule. But after a couple weeks, it started to get on my nerves, mainly because of the timing. It was always right when I was half asleep, right when I was turning over, right when I was drifting off and my brain was trying to go quiet. It didn't just creak when I stepped on it. It creaked when I didn't. That's the part I didn't want to admit to myself. There were nights when I'd be lying completely still, phone down, eyes closed, and I'd hear it groan softly, as if someone had pressed a foot onto it. I'd freeze, then shift slightly on purpose, and the rest of the floor would respond with normal little noises while that one board stayed quiet, like it had already made its point. I told myself it was temperature changes, or the radiator, or the building settling. I told myself it was nothing, because the alternative was too stupid to take seriously. Then last night happened. I had gotten home late, tired in that numb city kind of way, where you've been around too many people, but still feel alone. I made something small for dinner, brushed my teeth, and climbed into bed with the light on because I wanted to read for a few minutes. My hair was still damp from a quick shower, and it was spread across the pillow and the back of my neck the way it always is. I remember thinking I should put it in a braid so it wouldn't get tangled, but I didn't bother. At some point, a coin slipped out of my hand. It was a quarter, I think. It bounced once on the hardwood and rolled toward the side of the bed, disappearing into that narrow gap near the nightstand. I didn't want to deal with it right then, but once I knew it was there, I couldn't stop thinking about it. It's a small thing, but my brain gets stuck on small things at night. If I know something is on the floor, I keep imagining stepping on it later, or hearing it roll again, or forgetting it's there and finding it in the dark with my foot. So I leaned over the edge of the bed and reached down, feeling around blindly. My fingertips hit the baseboard, then slid over the wood. I felt the edge of the annoying floorboard, the one that always groaned. My fingers slipped into a slight gap. That stopped me. The board didn't feel like the others. It felt loose, like it had a give to it. I pressed down, then lifted gently at the edge. Instead of resisting, it rose a fraction of an inch. I sat up fully, suddenly more awake. For a second I wondered if this was why it creaked. Maybe it wasn't nailed down properly. Maybe it was just slightly lifted and rubbing against something every time pressure hit it. That would have been a simple, boring answer, and I wanted that answer badly. I got out of bed and knelt on the floor. The air near the baseboard always felt colder, like the wall leaked outside air. I ran my fingernails along the edge and found a spot where the board was easiest to lift. Then I pried it up carefully. I expected dust, maybe an old pipe, maybe nothing at all. Instead, tucked under the board like someone had hidden it on purpose, was a small, black journal, leather-bound, plain, with no title. It was held shut with an elastic band that looked worn and frayed, like it had been stretched and snapped back into place 1,000 times. My first thought was that it belonged to the previous tenant. My second thought, almost immediately, was that I shouldn't touch it. There was this quick, sharp sense of crossing a line, like finding someone's purse and looking inside, like seeing a door slightly open and knowing you could peek, but you shouldn't. But curiosity is a real thing. It doesn't feel like a choice when it hits you. It feels like gravity. I sat on the edge of the bed with the journal in my hands. The leather felt slightly sticky, like it had absorbed moisture over the years. The elastic band snapped off with a soft sound. I told myself I'd just glance at the first page, just enough to see if it had a name so I could return it, if that was even possible. I opened it. The first page had a date written at the top, neat and careful. Exactly 2 years ago. Same month. Same week. That made my stomach tighten. The first line was simple. He's still here. It said. I can hear him breathing the second I kill the lights. I stared at the words for a long moment, waiting for my brain to decide it was a joke or a writing exercise, or some kind of dramatic diary entry from someone with a flair for horror. But the handwriting didn't look playful. It looked sincere. It looked like someone writing in the dark, gripping the pen too tightly. I kept reading. At first, the entries were normal in their own way. The writer described the apartment, the old floors, the high ceilings. She complained about the smell in the hallway. She talked about the neighbors being loud. She sounded like a person trying to settle into a new place. Then the tone started shifting. She wrote about hearing movement when she was alone, about feeling watched in the shower, about waking up to small things being different. Not obviously changed, just slightly wrong, like someone wanted her to notice, but didn't want her to have proof. A chair angled a little more toward the window, a mug placed closer to the edge of the sink, a book that she was sure she left face down, now sitting face up. She wrote about checking locks and windows again and again. She wrote about leaving a small piece of tape on the door frame, so she'd know if the door opened while she was out. One entry talked about her toothbrush. She said it was damp in the morning, even though she hadn't brushed since the night before. At first, she assumed it was the bathroom being humid. Then she tested it. She dried it completely and left it in a different spot. In the morning, it was damp again. She wrote that she could smell mint in the bathroom at odd times, like someone had just finished brushing. That's when my stomach did that slow turning thing, like the start of nausea. I flipped pages faster, no longer reading every word, but picking up enough to feel the direction it was going. The fear got deeper and more focused. She described calling the police, more than once. Every time they found nothing. No forced entry, no broken lock, no prints, no signs someone else had been in the apartment. They asked her if she had enemies, if she was using drugs, if she was under stress. One entry said the officer's voice turned gentle in a way she hated, like he'd already decided what kind of person she was. As the journal moved toward the end, the handwriting got worse, not just messier, jagged, angry, pressed hard into the paper like she was trying to carve the words. He doesn't come from outside, she wrote in an entry dated 4 months ago. He's already here. He knows my schedule. He waits for my eyes to close before he crawls out of his hole. I stopped reading for a moment and looked around my studio, as if the room might have changed while my eyes were on the page. Everything looked normal. My coat hanging by the door, the small kitchen light, the shadowy corners near the closet, the bed, the nightstand. The groaning floorboard now lifted and exposing a dark gap in the floor. I tried to laugh quietly, just once, like I could shake it off. A poor woman who was unwell, I told myself. A woman who got paranoid, who scared herself, who wrote stories to cope. Maybe she had schizophrenia, or maybe she was dealing with something else, and the apartment became a symbol for it. People write frightening things when their minds are not stable. That happens. That explanation was the only thing that kept me from getting up and walking straight out of the apartment. Then I turned to the last page. The date made my blood run cold. It was dated only days before I signed my lease. Not months, not a year, days. And it was a single sentence, written in huge, trembling capital letters, like someone had been forcing their hand to keep moving. He's bored of me. He says the next one should have longer hair. He says he prefers blondes. I read it again and again, because my brain kept trying to soften it, kept trying to turn it into something less direct. But it was direct. I'm blonde, and my hair reaches the small of my back. I dropped the journal. It hit the bedspread, then slid down onto the floor with a soft thump. My hands were shaking so hard I had to grip the mattress to keep myself from tipping forward. I sat there, frozen, staring at the dark gap where the floorboard had been. The space looked deeper than it should have, not like a shallow space between boards and subfloor. It looked like a hole. That's when I noticed something I had somehow overlooked for 3 months. Under the wooden frame of my bed, partly hidden by shadows and the way the bed skirt hung, there was a small maintenance hatch, a square of wood with a seam around it. I had assumed it was part of the bed frame or some old panel that had been painted over, but now that I was looking for it, now that my mind had been given a new way to see the room, I recognized it for what it was, a crawl space hatch, It was supposed to be sealed shut with old layers of white paint. That's how these old places are. Maintenance panels get painted over and forgotten. But the paint around the screws was chipped. Freshly chipped. Tiny white flakes were scattered on the rug, right below the side of the bed where my head usually was when I slept. For a moment, the room felt like it tilted. I leaned forward and stared at the flakes, and my body started reacting before my mind fully caught up. My heart sped up. My throat went dry. The hair on my arms lifted. Someone had been working at those screws recently. Quietly, while I was sleeping, I lunged for my phone on the nightstand, without thinking, ready to call anyone. The police, the landlord, a friend. I didn't care. I just needed a voice on the line, proof that the world outside this room still existed. The screen stayed black. I frowned, confused. I had it plugged in all night. I could see the charging cable. I unplugged it and tried again. Nothing. My hands shook as I looked at the charging port, and that's when I saw it. The port was jammed with something small and white. I dug at it with my fingernail, and a tiny wad came loose. It looked like chewed paper, rolled tight and pushed in like a plug. I unrolled it. On the paper, someone had drawn a crude face, a wide grin with too many teeth, eyes that were just dark circles. Under it was one word, in dark ink: hush. I sat there holding that tiny paper like it weighed 100 pounds. My mind replayed everything I'd heard at night: the groaning floorboard, the sound that always seemed to happen near my nightstand, the small shifts in the apartment that I'd blamed on myself being forgetful, the way I sometimes woke up with my hair feeling slightly moved, like it had been pushed aside from my neck. Then, the realization landed so hard, it felt physical. The floorboard didn't groan because of my weight. It groaned because someone was stepping on it from underneath, because someone was using it as a foothold, because someone had been climbing out of the space below the floor. And every time they did, they stepped on that board next to my bed. I looked down at the hatch again. I told myself to run, to get to the door, to scream, to do something. But my bed was between me and the door in the worst possible way. The fastest path out of the studio forced you to pass the side of the bed where the hatch was. I imagined crossing that gap and feeling a hand grab my ankle. I imagined the hatch lifting like a mouth opening. I hate that my brain does that. Creates images I can't control. But once it starts, it doesn't stop. So I did the next best thing. I grabbed my laptop. It was on my desk across the room. I moved toward it carefully, like loud movement might trigger something, like whatever was under my bed could hear my breathing. I hated that thought, but I couldn't shake it. I opened the laptop and saw the battery warning. 10%. The charger was on the other side of the room, but the outlet by the desk was loose, and I didn't want to crawl around on the floor to plug it in. I didn't want to be low to the ground. I didn't want to be close to the bed. I didn't want to move at all, but sitting still wasn't helping either. I started typing, fast, trying to get words out while I still could. I told myself, if I wrote it down, it would be real. If it was real, someone could help. If someone could help, then maybe I wouldn't have to face whatever came next alone. I kept glancing at the door, then back at the bed. The studio suddenly felt too small. The air felt stale and thick, like the apartment had stopped circulating oxygen. I watched the space beneath the bed, and then I saw it. In the gap between the hatch and the floor, in the darkness under my bed, a human eye was staring back at me. Bloodshot, wide, unblinking. I stared so hard my eyes started to sting. I waited for it to blink. I waited for it to shift away. I waited for my brain to correct itself and turn it into a shadow or a trick of light. It didn't blink. 3 minutes passed, or maybe it was less, but it felt like an hour. The eye stayed there, open and patient, like it had all the time in the world, like it had been doing this longer than I'd been alive. I couldn't hear breathing, but I could hear something else, a soft pressure sound, a slow, careful movement. The wood of the hatch creaked upward. Not the floorboard this time, the hatch, lifting, just enough that the scene darkened and the gap widened like a thin smile. My laptop battery icon flashed again. My hands are still on the keyboard, and I can't tell if I'm shaking because I'm cold or because my body is trying to turn into electricity and leave. I'm sitting on the bed now because I didn't know where else to go. Without getting closer to that hatch, I can't run to the door without passing it. I can't call anyone because my phone is dead and I know it isn't an accident. I keep looking down at that widening gap. The eye is still there, still open, still watching, and the hatch is still rising, slow and steady, like whoever is under there is being careful not to make noise, like they've done this before, like they already know exactly how I'll react.